Yo, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to the second episode of the PTCG Hotline. It's the show with the hottest topic and the hottest talks. We got our co-host, Henry Brand, and our special guest for the week, Isaiah Bradner. We're going to be taking a look at the hottest topics, joining in on this show. And then we're going to have you guys, the viewers, coming into the call live to ask questions and stuff like that. As we hear Isaiah riffle shuffling cards for some reason. So we're going to go ahead and switch over to the guest screen. Here we go. Here we are with our co-host, Henry Brand. How you doing, my guy?
I'm going great, Jenks. You know, it's a good day. We have a special guest just below us. He's got his own little portion of the screen. How's it going, Isaiah?
All right, Mewtwo. I went with Isaiah's guidance and got some tournament keys myself with Mewtwo, but then I've switched to the Lucario Melmetal train after, I'm sure everyone has seen some of my tweets, where I just get clapped by these PvP players. So that's been my play with Mewtwo, but I will say I've gotten 2 tournament wins with Mewtwo, so my qualifications are not going quite as solidly as Isaiah's, but whatever. And then Henry, I don't believe you're playing, correct?
I'm yet to start my Players' Cup qualification journey. Here in Oceania, I don't think we even get to 128 players qualifying, so I might just play a couple tournaments and leave it at that. But then I think I'll probably be, not playing in the actual thing.
That's yeah. The Oceania region, the only place where you can qualify with 8 rep compared to every other region who's stressing. But yeah,
we got it chilling.
A crazy past couple of weeks. Obviously, we're gonna wait for some of the guests to go ahead and join into the Discord, voice their topics. If you're in chat and want to join in on the live call, make sure you hit !Discord, join into the Discord, put your topic in the podcast topics, and then join the waiting room where we'll pull you in. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and talk about, Players' Cup 2, some of the stuff we've been seeing. I know that there's been this Japan tournament that's going on. I don't know a whole bunch about it, but maybe our guests or Henry do. And hopefully we have some good stuff to talk about before we get some guests going.
Yeah, okay, so I think the tournament in Japan will be a really cool thing to touch on. Before we do, Isaiah, I want to ask you, what do you think the root of your success with Mewtwo at the moment is in these tournaments? Do you think it's the prevalence of ADP or just the way people are playing?
Honestly, I think it's kind of a mix of both. I definitely think the ADP is a favored matchup, at least 60-40. Obviously, you get the turn 2 Flare Blitz, they're not going to be able to Ultimate Ray, and it just kind of goes downhill from there. So I think that definitely one part of it is that I hit probably 40% ADP, and every time I hit one, I'm happy to hit it. But I also think that people really don't know what they're doing when they're playing against me, kind of what you said. Today, I made finals in a tournament, and I think I basically drew past for the first, 7 turns. I was down 5 prize cards against Scorch, and then in the final turn of the game, I knocked out a T-Tran, and then he hit into my Mewtwo with the Horror, giving me the Flare Blitz knockout back on his Scorch, and then I just easily won the game from there. So I think that it's a combination of Mewtwo having really good matchups right now, and then people not knowing how to play against it.
Yeah, for sure. And do you also think that the meta, since it's a best-of-1 knockout kind of tournament, favors Mewtwo because people are more likely to play the, standard meta decks like ADP rather than, more fringe things that Mewtwo might struggle with?
Oh, for sure. And another thing that's kind of cool about this format is that Mewtwo's it's probably the best deck to donk with right now. You have so many outs that you have Reshizard, you can easily get the Welder attached 200 kill an active Pokemon. I play Mimikyu Gengar, so I can go something like Horror House into Poltergeist on turn 1 if they get 1 Pokemon. That really lets me capitalize on 1, slow starts, but then 2, it's with the new supporter rule. It's not that unrealistic for your opponent to only have 1 basic on turn 1. So yeah, I think that's one cool thing about Mewtwo. I've definitely got a few donks in, but then it's just a really consistent deck, and like you said, in a best-of-1 format, when people are trying to play those consistent decks that Mewtwo wants to hit, it kind of works out for it.
Yeah, awesome. So hopefully your last 30 keys can get a similar result. Now let's have a look at the Yokohama Champions League. Jenks, have you had much of a look into that?
I actually have not. I watched Celio's video today on why we should have a globalized format or his thoughts on it, and I kind of saw the standings, but I didn't actually look at it in depth. I was getting ready to go to work, so I'm going to go ahead and pull it up on Limitless. Henry, I'm going to let you take it away on this one.
All right, so I was lucky enough to catch a little bit of the stream. It was quite interesting. It was fascinating. We had 1,500 players at this Yokohama Champions League. For the first tournament back from COVID, and they've got 1,500 players, which is pretty crazy. Something that stands out to me, the first thing is when I look at the standings on Limitless. Now, of course, take this with a grain of salt. I don't know that many players in Japan. I only know maybe less than 15. But I see almost no one that I recognize in the top, maybe 32 all the way. I think the highest I recognized was Sugayoshi Yamato in 35th. And I maybe I was missing one. No, Taki Yoneda at 17th.
Yeah.
Then everything up from there was pretty unique. And obviously we have a different format to them, but we of course see everyone's favorite deck, Baby Blounds, taking the win. Did you manage to watch much of this, Isaiah?
No, I didn't watch it, but I've looked at the results a decent bit, and the thing that kind of jumped out to me first is that the highest placing Zacian ADP is in 14th. There wasn't any Zacians there wasn't any ADPs in top 8. There was a few in top 16, but that was it. And then obviously we had a bunch in 32, 64. It looked like it was a pretty popular choice, but I thought that was kind of interesting how ADP's kind of dominating over here. We have a bunch of talk about how it's by far the best deck in format. It should be banned, but over in Japan, it's really not that popular. It didn't have a great showing and didn't perform well.
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest reasons for that is, of course, Baby Blounds. I think that would keep it in check a fair bit with Fiery Flint and everything like that, because they can actually hit that reliable 300 on turn 2. And also, I wonder if Colossal proved to be a bad matchup for it, because we see a fair bit of Colossal in the top 10. I think we see 4 in top 10, 2 in top 8. And it seems like, from I'm looking at the list, they only play one Crobat V and no other support, like 2 prize support Pokemon. So if ADP wants to win, they have to go through 3 prizes. Sorry, 3 actual attacks rather than 2.
Yeah, I was looking at that deck, and it's very interesting. I'm actually I don't really understand the deck, I guess. I didn't get to catch the stream, so I understand what it does. I think Colossal does like 130 if you discard an energy from the top of your deck, right? And then
not quite. If it's an energy on the top of your deck, it does more damage and then attaches it to Colossal.
Yeah, and then it attaches it. And then it takes 4 energy to do the big 240 attack. But whenever I'm looking at this deck, it seems, I guess that, or does it play? No, it doesn't even Karate Belt. The thing that I'm wondering is I don't really understand how they get their energy on the board. Like, other than Colossal accelerating to itself, all of its attacks are kind of huge. So I feel like if ADP just gets 2 attacks off into the Colossal and maybe even ignores its GX attack, I'm not really sure how the Colossal player comes back from that. But I could be wrong. It looks kind of like a Groudon, but it's a little bit less powerful because it can actually die.
Well, I think the biggest advantage it has is that it KOs the Dene and Crobat both for 1 energy. And that's pretty big.
Yeah.
And then if you manage to get an attachment onto Colossal turn 1, turn 2 you use the first attack, and then on turn 3 you are using the 240 attack. So it's not unrealistic to maybe KO an ADP like in 2 hits straight away. And I think then from then on it kind of just preys on Dedenne once the first Colossal goes down. So I think I would see that matchup being fairly favorable just based on the way the engines are built. Like if ADP maybe went slower and used maybe Tag Call and didn't rely on Dedenne so much, then maybe it'd have a better matchup. But I think that the way it's built at the moment, it definitely probably seems favorable. Beat Eternatus pretty reliably. And Colossal with Stone Fighting also has a lot of HP.
Yeah, that is very true. And one thing is, I think that at least the list that we have, I think it was in top 8, 7th place. It's a really cool list. It has a 3/3 Macargo line, 3 Oranguru, and like you said, only that 1 Crobat V to draw cards. So I really like this list. It looks cool. I'd be interested to try it out. We really won't get a chance to try this deck out because Jirachi Prism and Macargo both rotate before we will get the Colossal. But I think this is a really cool deck. It just looks cool, right? Like Macargo's a card that's really underutilized. I feel it's been used in a few top decks. It was used in that Buzzgarb deck. It was used with Zoroark a little bit, but overall the card hasn't really seen, I guess, its full potential. And getting to see it again in this deck is really cool.
It's awesome. Jenks, do you reckon that Colossal has any legs without Magcargo?
Honestly, I think we covered this a little bit on the last cast, and I think you said it was decent. If we had something that could ability lock to pair it with, it'd be pretty strong. I think what's crazy about this event is obviously the ADP not performing, but then again, the POG Championship format, ADP kind of underperformed there. So I don't think it's surprising to see these types of results. And then Bob in chat mentioned that Jake in chat noticed that the Baby Blondes list is wild. Like, if you look at this thing, it's not even really Baby Blound. There's just 2 Baby Blounds and a bunch of fire Pokemon, and then Cramorant. So I think like it's really neat that these decks are doing well, and the Colossal, it sounds solid. I like the gust up something and hit it with the combo like a Dedenne or a Crobat and just take that one shot. So yeah, the Colossal deck sounds pretty cool. Unfortunately, I don't know if it'll do well post without those cards, but I don't know. This tournament's pretty sick, and honestly, in the time that we are right now, holding an 1,500 person regionals is kind of crazy. But they successfully did it. And then, if for anyone that didn't see the tweets about the event, their stream setup was like crazy. They had everyone had masks on. There were like dividers between the people. Yeah, it looked really cool. And I don't think I'm surprised that ADP is not doing super well here or dominating, just because that POG format is kind of the same thing.
For sure. And we
Yeah,
see.
I have.
Sorry, my bad. You guys there.
Oh no. Go ahead, Henry. Go ahead. What are you gonna say?
I think it's just interesting how like there's a huge variety of decks. We have like Mad Party, kind of like everywhere almost. There's so much. If you look in the huge thing, and there's a lot of people, and it's not just a fluke really. Like the amount of flukes are much lower. And also, I want to point this out because I don't think this is a deck we really have in our format. There are 2 Donphan decks in top 128. So I need to figure out what Donphan does. So it's not out yet. Does anyone actually know what Donphan does?
I have no idea. I know the fan P can, if you get some crazy combination of cards, one-shot Eternatus, but I have no idea what Donphan does.
Well, let me have a quick look. Pull this up. It's from Amazing Volt Tackle. It does, for 1 energy, 120, and it does 20 to each of your benched Pokemon. Now, I don't know how that's quite good enough, but they've made it work.
Yeah.
You guys having a look at this deck? It's kind of crazy.
Once again, abusing that combo. Maybe the ADPization of the Japanese format is just combo. Like it's in all these decks. maybe the Donphan deck is ADP, on crack. They just gust your Dedenes and Crobats and one shot them for energy. Like I must be missing something here because that's all I see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's basically what it does. It's got a Beast Bringer for the Buzzwole as well. It plays Beast Bringer, it plays Vitality Band, a Skateboard, 3 Dojo. Oh, this is crazy. The hell is this? It's got one of everything. I know they do. Japanese do like their one-ofs. And I even saw in the Blacephalon deck we had 2 Will Jenkins Pokemon catchers. So it seems like they've gone a little bit crazy.
So I was gonna talk about the Blacephalon deck because Will was saying that it wasn't really a Blacephalon deck at all. And this was actually not something new. The Japanese brought this exact same type of deck to the POG Championships. Yoshi played this deck, and he was my one loss the entire event. So this isn't something that's new to them. They've been playing this type of list where they only play 2 Blown, and they kind of build it like Welder Box. They have the Reshizard. They have this list doesn't play the Heatran. Yoshi didn't either. I think it was just Reshizard, Blacephalon, GX, and then maybe 1 or 2 other attackers in there with the Blown. And what they did was there are matchups where you just couldn't go Blown. So they would just lead Reshizard, Welder onto it, and then try to smash your field. And obviously it worked against me. It worked really well here. Took the dub. So it might look weird at first, but this is not a new thing in Japan. This is something that they've actually played as ordinary. This is kind of their baby Blowns, is this weird hybrid build that we don't really see in the US.
I think it's really cool, and I almost wonder if it has legs coming in without without Fiery Flint. If you can just use Reshizard as an early attacker while you can't set up Baby Blown.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I haven't tried it myself. I've talked to some friends about it who have tested it, but I think it's definitely a lot worse. Obviously, without Flint, the problem with the deck, I think, in this format is that Baby Blown is kind of weak. In that format, Baby Blown is obviously really strong, but it's a lot weaker in this format. But obviously, it hasn't been tested, so who knows if it could be good. And then one thing that I noticed is that Pikarom would actually won the Atlas POG Championships. It was kind of the BDIF pre-rotation. The best placement is actually outside of top 32 at 33rd. So I'm guessing that's because of the new Fighting Next Colossal and Donphan pushing it down. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that it kind of dominated the POG Championships, and then here it is all the way down at the bottom.
So what do you guys think about Celio's video? I don't know if you guys saw it, but do you think we should have a globalized format? I think some of his takes were that basically the research and development team from TCP, I guess, they test for Japan's format, but then when cards or rotations happen here, because they don't happen as frequently in Japan, they usually don't test for them or don't undertest. I mean, I guess we really don't know for certain. But what do you guys think about that? And do you think that this format that we have was just under-tested? Or, because the Belelba ban and Mismagius ban, to probably majority of people, seem pretty, like weird. But in Japan, they have cards that we don't, and the combination still exists. They would still have a Ranguru at this current time. So what do you guys think about globalized format?
I think I don't know. I did not watch this video, but if that's what the sum of it is, I think that the globalized format is probably in all situations ideal, right? Like if in a perfect world, it's probably better if we have the same format as Japan, and then we can get the cards at the same time, and we can match up, and whenever they come over for Worlds, they don't have to adjust and all that stuff, and that would maybe make for a bit of a better format because, as you said, we don't know if this format has been tested. Maybe they didn't think about the specific format, but I think that while it's ideal, it probably isn't the biggest deal because if they're testing for formats over in Japan, as long as the only thing that's happening is our cards are getting rotated out, I don't think that any insane combinations should happen in the standard format, I guess. Like maybe they didn't want this exact standard to exist, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it isn't that huge, right? There aren't any insane combos in standard because they wouldn't exist in Japan standard. So maybe the formats aren't as healthy as they would be, but I don't think it makes as big a deal if we have a globalized format. But I do agree it would in most situations it would just be ideal, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think one issue that people have touched on in the past, which I don't know whether you see it as an issue or not, if we have the same format as Japan but they get the cards first, it kind of removes like a large amount of creativity from at least for the West. We kind of like just kind of mimic lists early on, and I know our meta always ends up being a little bit different to Japan's, just based on I guess their lists being very early on, and then gradually we develop. And in general, play styles are a little bit different when it comes to our regions and Japanese style in general. But I think still just not being able to just I guess be thrown in the deep end straight away when a new set comes out can be looked on as a pretty big downside. And so that's kind of I guess one appeal of having separate formats since our sets aren't synced. But yeah, at the same time, one does wonder if the game is balanced a little bit more for Japan.
I agree with that, Henry. Yeah, if they got the cards beforehand, then that would be that would be huge for us. We would have kind of the set meta decks. We wouldn't have to think. We wouldn't have to kind of traverse those early waters, like you said. So we kind of have that at Worlds times. Whenever they have the set first, we look over there. We see what did well. We try to transition that into our format. But if we had the exact same format and they had the cards 2 months in advance, then things might be a lot more boring because people already know what's doing well. It would kind of just be we'd like almost have like a scrying glass. We could just look in the future and see what we would want to play. So I agree that if we don't get the cards at the same time as Japan, then it would be better for us to have a separate format. Just it makes it more fun. I would rather have the challenge of building a new thing rather than having Japan working it along with us.
Absolutely, yeah.
I agree with that. I think it'd be really cool if we had a global format where cards got released at the same time globally, but it seems like too much would have to happen for that. And I agree with Isaiah. Just navigating those early waters is usually a very fun and stressful thing, especially if you have a big, international tournament or something going on and you're like just thrown into a format and you're like, oh, I don't know if my opponent's deck is like the list I was testing against or whatever. So there's a lot of navigation, like Isaiah said, in those early formats. And yeah, I think it's really cool. We got a ton of cool stuff coming out of Japan this week. I think that was probably the main talking points. I don't think there was anything else. Henry, maybe I'm missing something, but with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and jump into some callers.
Yeah, no, I think we're all good. We covered most of it.
All right, so before we jump into the callers real quick, I want to explain the format for all the people here. We have a ton of people here. I'm glad to see it. Glad to see you guys are here for the hotline. We're going to quickly go over the format, and then we're going to jump into some callers. Also, we decided that for the PTCG hotline, we're going to take a little bit of a more relaxed approach, not as serious, not completely competitive all the time. So, if you had a hot food take or wanted to ask the special guest something, you could go ahead and come in here because I know Isaiah has some pretty interesting food takes. But the steps to onto the hotline, the steps to get onto the hotline is going to be !Discord is going to take you to the Jenks' Lab Discord. Once you're in there, you should see a welcome screen to the instructions channel for the PTCG hotline. Go ahead and give that a quick read. Then once you have read that, go ahead and post the topic that you want to come on the cast and talk about. This is a live viewer call, so you are going to get dragged into the live call and voice your opinion. Please don't be childish about this. We don't want to ruin a good thing. Go ahead and put your topic in there. I'll go ahead and say join the waiting room, and then once you have joined the waiting room, in no order, we will drag you from the waiting room call into the live call. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and drag in our first guest. Go ahead and give him a little bit of a heads up. just so that he is ready, because I know they're talking in the waiting room. I decided to give him the unmute. But here we go. Our first topic, our first caller. Here we go. How's it going? Welcome to the PTCG Hotline. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Yo, what's going on, Will? My name is Alex Garcia, the guy with two hats, and I am calling from New York.
Alex Garcia, the man, the myth, the legend, recurring caller. He was here on episode 1. Glad to have you back. Today, we kind of just went over this. You got a different topic. Go ahead and give it to us.
So I want to discuss something very near and dear to my heart. Candy. But not just any candy. Sour candy. So, I'm like a connoisseur of food, connoisseur of candy, and I'm pretty proud of that, not gonna lie. I've had all sorts of different sweets, but one thing in particular I've noticed fairly recently, why the heck are sour Skittles so sour? Like, they're more sour, like, than those extreme sour Sour Patch Kids. Those things are like nothing. Those things, they're obviously more sour than regular Skittles, more sour than Sour Mike and Ike's, for crying out loud. What do you think about that?
Okay, I'll start off on this one. I don't think that I haven't had sour Skittles very many times, but I actually am definitely gonna agree with Alex on this one. I think they're just way too sour. They're like unenjoyably sour. You eat them and then there's like no taste. It's just like pain in your mouth, you know? So I agree with that. They look really good, like they have the dust on them and stuff, and then like sour Skittles, you're like, oh, maybe this would be better than regular Skittles, but then you eat them and they're just so sour for no reason. So I am with you on this one, Alex.
I mean, at least Warheads are sour, and then you have that little sweet. So after that, like, it's meant to be like for kids who are daring each other. Like, you pop 2 in your mouth at once as like you lost a bet or something, and then they're sweet after, so you don't hurt yourself to death and don't like, I don't know, something happened to your mouth where it like disintegrates. But sour Skittles, my mouth is actually hurting right now. I'm gonna be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I had some. I was like, whoa.
Well, Alex, it's always a pleasure when you come on because you always bring a special energy that we can't really replicate ourselves. I personally haven't had these sour Skittles. We don't have them down here, but they sound a little bit enticing because regular Skittles are nice and sweet, but you've kind of got me a bit scared with them. Jenks, have you had these before?
Yeah, honestly, F in chat for Henry, doesn't have all the diverse options that we have here in the States. And you walk into a supermarket and you're like, oh, okay. I actually had the pleasure of taking Henry, Stefan Ivanov, Joao, and Burt Walters into just your average U.S. Safeway in Washington, D.C. And boy, was that an experience, finding double stuffed Oreos and different stuff. The marketing, the placement of products, honestly top notch. And I think our guests of the U.S. were quite overwhelmed. But for sour Skittles, I've only had them a few times. Not the biggest fan of sour candy myself, but as my brother is in the chat talking about it, they like scratch your gums. I'm not really about it. Honestly, sour candy, probably not a vibe. I'd much rather prefer a nice chocolate bar or something, fat kid life. But sour Skittles, yeah, I'm with you, Alex.
No,
100%.
I respect.
100% with you, Alex. They are way too sour, my guy.
Like, I love sour candies. When they had Atlantic City, I was going all after the sour taffies. Like, I was like stuffing them down. That place had such good taffy. I would also like to say, shout out to Atlantic City and Ocean City across the bridge. Some of the best taffy you could ever find, like, in the entire world, in my opinion. Even though I have not been across the world that many times, but no leaks.
We'll trust you.
Painful, but if you can get past the very pain, that's even worse than Warheads, in my opinion. And I've eaten Warheads many times. It can be still nice sweetness, but yeah, Henry, I might have to ship you out a small little package. You at least got to try them to get it out of your system.
I think I might just have to, Alex. I don't think I really have a choice here.
If you're willing to pay the $20 on shipping for under a pound of stuff, I think it's not a
it's but the only thing is Henry's got to do a live recording of him eating the sour Skittles.
I think I can do that. I can handle that.
You heard it here.
Let's go.
Sour Skittles on the PTCG Hotline with Ben Rebrand the next time. We'll get them. Alex, once again, thank you so much for coming on. We always enjoy you. And like Henry said, your energy is unmatched. But we're going to go ahead and get into the next caller. So any last words before we have you head out?
Yeah, just thanks for having me. everything's delicious here, I guess. I hope you guys are all hungry and wanting a midnight snack now. And I hope to see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you, Alex. We'll see you.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Alex.
See you guys.
Thanks, Alex.
All right, gonna go ahead and let our next caller know, just so everyone in chat knows, already said it, !Discord, join the instructions channel, peep it, read it, and then get into the waiting room. Gonna go ahead and drag in our next guest, another returning person. Here we go. Gonna go ahead and give him the heads up. I decided to unmute the waiting room channel. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Yo, welcome returning caller. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Ian Robb, calling from Rhode Island.
All right, Ian Robb, the Pikarom King, qualified for that Players' Cup, hopefully. What is the topic for today?
ADP is actually fine and does not need to be banned.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and start with Isaiah on this. I think I have my own opinion.
All right. Okay, so I actually... Wait, does Ian have an opinion? Because he asked the question, so if he has an opinion, I feel like he should
the
go
card
first.
is actually fine. It's because, like, I think it's just that, like, take extra prize, yes, it's, like, inherently breaks the game, but taking 2 energy and taking an attack can be incredibly slow, and I just don't think people are building their decks to actually handle the ADP matchup, and that's why they keep losing.
All right, so I will go on. My take is I don't really have a solid stance on this. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm pretty sure this is the answer that I'll give. I think that the card definitely could be banned. I think it's a broken enough card. The text is absolutely insane. Taking an extra prize card whenever you take a knockout is nothing we've seen ever before in the trading card game. So I think that a ban on the card would not be unreasonable. I wouldn't be upset if they banned the card. Obviously, it does gatekeep some decks. I've tried to build a bunch of decks, and then obviously it just loses to ADP. You can say that for a bunch of different decks, but specifically in this case, I think ADP is a gatekeeper. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think it needs to be banned. I think it is a very good card, and it does kind of break the game, but it isn't, it isn't insane. It isn't toxic. There are ways to beat it, like Ian said. So I would probably lean on the side of I would slightly like to see it banned. I just think it would be interesting during these times to have that shake up for the format, especially when, we're in these Players' Cup where people are complaining about it being only ADP. That would bring a lot of variety to the table. But I don't think that it needs to be banned, although I think it's like kind of in the middle where it could be banned, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I agree with you, Isaiah. I think that I don't think it needs to be banned, and ADP to me feels like more of a symptom than the problem itself. There's definitely the systems we have at the moment is what enabling ADP to be so strong, and I think it is undisputed best deck in format. That doesn't always mean it's the best deck to play, but in terms of base power level, it definitely is the highest, right? Like you can almost win any matchup if you draw properly or things kind of align for you and more consistently than any other deck can. But the thing is, I guess that when you lose to it, it feels very uninteractive. ADP doesn't really touch your active Pokemon in most games, and that kind of thing. Previously, like the top decks in the past, let's say like, I don't know, when Pika, when it just came out in Team Up, Zoroark decks, things like that, decks that were so dominant, were always a fair bit skillful, to play, and especially the mirror matches or whatever. But the fact that ADP feels very, I guess, uninteractive and things like that is what makes people really want to see it banned, because it's just, I guess, no one enjoys playing it or playing against it.
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, I think that... I was going to say one quick thing. I think the one interesting thing is ADP, Ian, you said that, you commit 2 energy, you have to commit an attack, which sounds like a lot, but at the same time, in this current format, the way lists are being built, you can get that attack off on turn 1. And that's actually a huge swing, especially with the supporter rule. If the ADP goes second and gets the attack off on turn 1, there's very little other decks can do, to keep up with that insane pace. So I think that in theory, right, the double attachment GX, it seems kind of slow. You get the GX off on turn 2, your opponent has time to stabilize. That sounds fine, but whenever it can just happen at lightning speed, and decks are so consistent now, ADP can do whatever it wants pretty much. That's when I think it may become a problem. But go ahead, Will.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I originally was on the stance that ADP should not be banned at all, because I just kind of figured people were complaining too much, yada yada yada. As someone as a ADP player, I was completely fine abusing the powers that are in the deck, and I didn't realize how big of a problem it is playing from the other side. Now that I've played a few Players' Cup qualifiers, you can see by my tweets, I have a plethora of cool clips of me just getting, having a good time on the PTCGO with some Super Mario Bros. 2 music on it. I think I would agree with Isaiah. I think that the card definitely deserves a ban, but at the same time, if we have to, live with it for a little bit longer, it's whatever. I'm sure as heck am like proud or happy that we're not playing with this format in real life. I feel like I'd be quite discouraged if that was the case, because I would show up to a League Cup, vibe out with the homies and get ADP'd in 4 turns and lose. And another thing that I noticed is, we touched on this a little bit earlier, Isaiah's been running through events with Mewtwo. If you miss a beat with no matter what deck you're playing, and ADP, does what it wants to, you kind of lose. And it's really sad. There's not a whole lot of comeback potential with Reset Stamp not being seen in a whole lot of decks, usually now opting for Marnie because there's too many outs on Stamp. Oricorio GX is running rampant in these ADP decks. There's a plethora of draw-based Pokemon and supporters, so you can't really stamp, plant, or anything your ADP opponent because they just draw out of it. And it's really annoying. There seems like there's no comeback potential, so if you miss a beat, you just fall behind and then lose. So I think I'm more towards the side that ADP should be banned after this Players' Cup experience, but I definitely agree with Isaiah's point and think it's a valid one. Do you have any counter, Ian?
It's more like ADP is more a symptom of the format than the actual, like, the card being the issue, in my opinion. Like, if I don't think if the cardization was ever printed, people would be complaining as much as they are.
So then the takeization is the problem?
I think this is more the format overall, honestly, not even just Zacian.
I mean, we've kind of gotten to a point where it's like, you can't go back, right? I mean, I think a lot of people think that there's too many consistency things, whether that's a Pokemon, whether that's a draw supporter, and then everything has huge hit points. Were there things in particular with the format you didn't like?
It's just it feels like a different game now than even, honestly, like, a couple months ago. It's just like, the goal of the game used to be like, you could actually win not just by taking 6 prizes the quickest way possible, but instead just play a slower game and actually be able to counter what they're doing. Instead of being, all right, what is my path to get 6 prizes the quickest possible?
I mean, I can agree with that. I mean, we saw lots of different strategies. There obviously were the mill decks, and then for the Atlas Pog, I guess is the recent previous format. Isaiah and I both top 8'd with Pikarom, where we have a comeback potential. You have Raichu, you can stamp people, you can paralyze them, and then, just because you dead draw early, you can still get in there and make a comeback. So yeah, I can definitely agree with that statement. The game is definitely different. It is a very, I need to find XYZ cards in this order and then win from there, and that XYZ is usually altered boss. So, and depending on the deck you're playing, it could be Welder, it could be the Karma Metalization. You need the things to go correctly, and like I said earlier, there's no real comeback.
Yeah, and I think to add to what Ian's saying is, almost in the past, you play for, I guess, board tempo and rather than just rushing prizes. And the biggest example is now with Boss, you use it always, like, I guess almost always, because you wanted to accelerate your prize thing. But in the past, let's say there was like Lysander, there was Shaman, there was Parallel City, and you had to like interact. Do I want to use, Lysander early to, like, I guess, hinder my opponent's setup, slow down their board, but at the same time, I'm not setting on my board. And so you had these kind of risk-reward decisions you had to make. Do I knock out the Shaman now, risk getting end low, but also if I don't knock it out, it could get like Sky Returned or Parallel City, like those kind of decisions, and playing around that, we don't really see them at the moment. And I think that is, I guess, the problem that Ian's touching on.
Yeah, after everything like playing this format, it just makes me miss like Zoropod mirrors and all that, the whole format.
Basically saying ADP Keldio's fun deck wasn't super broken against everything, and it was interactive. The Mewtwo players could use player skill to use Greninja GX and bench it and go through your Keldios that way, or if they didn't know what they were doing, they would discard it, then you lost zone it. So back to that, I guess it was Ultra Prism through Cosmic Eclipse format. That was a fine format, and it played out quite differently from this one. But I mean, unless anyone else has anything to add, I think that's a good wrap up on that topic. Zacian being the problem of the format, kind of a cool take.
Yeah, I have something to say. I kind of have a take on that. I don't really know that Zacian is I don't really know that it's fair to say that Zacian is the problem of the format, because whenever you think about ADP Zacian, the Zacian part is so irrelevant in like 90% of games, right? Like, you don't need Zacian to go attach twice to ADP, GX, boss, accelerate to ADP, boss again. So I don't really know if it's fair to say Zacian's a problem, because while Zacian is just kind of the perfect partner, it has an insane ability, it does a ton of damage with this attack, I don't think that the attack damage comes up a lot. I think that most of the time the game is just, I could have any Pokemon that did 150 damage to accelerate with ADP, and I would still win the game. I don't really need it to be exactly Zacian.
Yeah, I think that
If that makes any sense.
no, I agree. It's not Zacian that's the problem. It's I think so. ADP is a card that alters the pace of the game, right? So, but in very precise ways. When it was ADP Keldeo, so you attach, you GX, then you attach, and then you attack, you accelerate, and even then you had a hard damage cap. But with Metal Saucer,
Exactly.
it removes the fixed pace that ADP has and removes a lot of the counterplay with it. So things like energy denial, things like just knocking out the ADP after altered suddenly don't really matter anymore in a lot of scenarios because you just have Metal Source to recover, and that kind of volatility is really what I guess pushes ADP over. But at the same time, there's a lot of other things that enable it. Like if we didn't have the Dene, the deck wouldn't be good. If we didn't have Boss, the deck wouldn't be good. There's a whole bunch of things, and that's why I think it's more of a symptom than a problem. But yeah.
Yeah, because if format could go slower, if Eternius didn't have to bench the Crobats, if it could just pass and chill, then ADP wouldn't be as good, obviously, right? But yeah, it goes as fast. But I agree, it's just the recovery that ADP has, where you can saucer back on board, and then it doesn't have the checks kind of that the ADP Keldeo had.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to wrap it up on this topic. Ian, once again, thank you so much for coming on. Well, we'll hopefully see you again in the future. The next person I'm going to go ahead and bring in is going to be something that is similar to the topic that we have now. I'm going to go ahead and pull them out of order. But before we have you go out, Ian, any final thoughts?
I think so. I think that was good. Thank you for having me.
All right, no problem. Have a good one.
Yeah, later, Ian.
All right, so our next caller, this has something to do with the standard format already. We're going to go ahead and introduce him here. Welcome to the PTCG Hotline. This is a new guest. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, my name's Noah Bujak. I am from Vancouver, British Columbia.
Let's go, Noah. Welcome to the PTCG Hotline. What is your topic, and let's talk about it.
So my topic is, in my opinion, Standard's biggest problem is that there just aren't enough interesting effects in the format, especially on trainer cards. All the trainer cards have very simple effects, and most of the best Pokemon are simply so good because of their high HP and damage, and nothing really else. Yeah, for a big example, ADP Zacian mostly just hits hard. Obviously the extra prize is a major effect too. But I would have to say that Zacian is partly another big issue, and simply the fact that Ultimate Ray is able to one-hit knock out almost anything that's worth 2 prizes adds on to that effect. And a deck like Eternatus VMAX, it just has 340 HP and hits for 270 damage. Nothing really interesting about it, just hits hard. Same with something like Centiskorch. Too much HP, just hits hard. Nothing really interesting about it.
Yeah, I think that kind of an interesting point and kind of a funny thing is that the one part of this game that hasn't really gotten power crept is our support Pokemon, right? We have Dedenne and Shaman. We have Shaman and we had Dedenne, and now we have Crobat. And while we have both of them, Dedenne is probably a better effect than any ones we had previously, they still have low HP. They still have that punishing effect of benching them. And I think that that's kind of interesting because if you're power creeping the entire rest of the format, I think you kind of have to power creep the draw Pokemon too. Because imagine if Dedenne and Crobat had 210 HP. ADP would be so much worse because they couldn't boss it, right? They would boss it and hit it, and then nothing would happen. It would obviously change the format a ton, but I think that that's one interesting thing that kind of pops up from what Noah's saying is that I don't know, it didn't really go along exactly with this point, but everything is power crept except for these support Pokemon. They just kind of play perfectly into ADP.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to things, it almost feels like we have no kind of, not lock effects necessarily, but there's no restricting what your opponent does in most scenarios, aside from maybe Crushing Hammer, but that's kind of random. In the past, what we had Parallel City, Hex Maniac, Garbodor, efficient item lock that isn't Vikavolt, things like that you could actually play different games. And think about Mega Ray. It was basically the same deck that Eternatus was, if not stronger, because you had Shaman, you had Spirit Link, you'd attack turn 1, things like that. But suddenly it wasn't as good in the format because Garbodor, N, Parallel City, all of these things shut it down a fair bit. Whereas now there's no restrictors, and it feels like the way that they're designing the game is so that you kind of can't interact with what your opponent is doing, and that way people get to enjoy their decks, their fun decks more, I guess, if they want to play all their cards and hit the big damage because there's nothing stopping them and restricting them. And obviously that's a really unhealthy way, at least in I think most competitive players' minds. but it seems to be the way they're going with the game design at the moment. I do agree with your topic, Noah. Jenks, what do you reckon?
I agree 100% with what Henry said. If you guys haven't seen the first episode of the Hotline, we touched on cards that could be reprinted or new cards that could be created to fix some of the format's problems. And a lot of what Henry just mentioned is stuff we talked about on the last one. Stuff like Garb, all these things that restrict your opponent. And I think Noah's 100% correct in saying that stuff is way too simple. Attach energy from the discard. Attack for a certain amount of damage with no effect, like Brave Blade. So I think there's just... Yeah, you're right. There's not a lot of trainers or Pokemon that are controlling in the game. The biggest example would be something like Excadrill, and it can't really, to my knowledge, it can't really win in the time limits that are in these Players Cup formats, and it is super difficult to play. It's not a Rangaroo. It's a little more than that. I don't know if Isaiah's messed with Excadrill at all to talk on that, but yeah, I think we would all agree that stuff is too basic, and there's nothing restrictive that's preventing your opponent from doing anything.
Yeah, and I want to touch on one more thing as well. With N in the past, it was a really restrictive effect, and it was a really interesting effect because obviously if you got ahead, not only could your opponent N you, but your N's become weaker, but also it's not like Stamp. Stamp is kind of, you play it and you want it to stick, like you need it to stick. Whereas with N, you're gonna play it, I guess, 3 times almost, and if your opponent doesn't miss the first time, you're gradually gonna make them not draw optimally over those maybe 3 or 4 turns that you're gonna be restricting the hand size, and that's kind of what made some interesting gameplay and things like that, whereas we don't have interesting effects like that at the moment.
Even when Reset Stamp first came out, it was the big difference is after ADP and then I guess bigger and better 3 prizers came out. I think that it kind of warped the entire format. I think that maybe the point where it started kind of getting like this for me was, I think the start of Rebel Clash format, you could start noticing that Reset Stamp was a lot worse because it just didn't put your opponent down. We've talked about this the entire night, right? But it doesn't put your opponent down enough. Like ADP, you're stamping them to 3. Like 4 cards is so many cards. Like you said, right? In old formats, we had Garb and we had N to 3, 2, and 1. Maybe you didn't get all of those, but you had the options to Garb and end them to those low numbers. And like you said, they have to whiff off of one of those, and then you have a chance to win the game. So it really punished players for going aggressive because you had to think about late game, you were going to have so many less resources available. In this format, that really isn't a thing. There is some resource managing, but it isn't as big a deal because you don't have to worry about not drawing out of those late game Stamp Plants. I think that Stamp Plant maybe you have to worry about drawing out of because those decks don't really have a great answer to that, but Stamp Plant just isn't popular in decks right now because everything needs abilities, so they can't play Power Plant.
Also, just like Crobat existing now, like Power Plant doesn't do anything to Crobat, so you can just quick ball for that now.
And also, I think with when it comes to like N and just in general with the game at the moment, in the past, I guess this is a little bit adjacent from your topic, but you kind of, if you miss, right, you could do something else, right? You'd be like, okay, I missed, what's my second option? But now it feels like with the fast tempo of the game and no, like, I guess restricting what your opponent does, low comeback potential, it feels like you miss, you're like, okay, well, I lose now because I missed. Like, there's no backup, I can't try and figure out a new game plan, that's kind of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good ending place on this topic. I don't think any of us would disagree with you. I think it's a good take, and hopefully going forward we get to see more cards that are a little more complex, a little more restrictive, and maybe an employee or a R&D team member sees our podcast and goes, "Hey, they're right. Let's put some stuff that would fix the game." But yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for this topic. Noah, thank you so much for coming on. Glad to have you glad to have you as a first-time guest. Hopefully we'll see you next week or in a week after. I'm gonna go ahead and drag in the next caller. Any final words before we let you go?
Nope, that's about it. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Have a good one, my guy.
Later, Noah.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and drag in the next one. This is a more focused on a card in a particular deck. For chat, if you don't know, !Discord, peep the instructions channel, post your topic in the podcast topics channel, and then join the waiting room, and we'll go ahead and drag you on. We're going to go ahead and get the next caller going. Here we go. Welcome to the PTCG Hotline. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm Aaron Friedman, and I'm calling from my room in Long Beach, California.
All right, that's Gaz. What's your topic and your opinion on it?
So I'm going to talk about why I think that Pokeball is potentially a good card in some VMAX decks, particularly Centiskorch.
Yo, Jenks, I got
right now.
disconnected. Sorry, Aaron.
So basically, it's kind of hard to explain. I'm not really sure where to start off, but I think I'll just start off by saying how I got to this conclusion. So I was testing like Centiskorch out, and the problem that I find with VMAX decks right now is that besides Eternatus, they don't really have like an amazing consistency engine. Like I don't even think Eternatus does, but at least there you can just sort of find whatever Pokemon you need, and it sort of gets you one step closer to your goal, which is doing more damage. But when you play a deck like Centiskorch, you have to be able to find pieces like Welder and pieces like the VMAX. And the problem, which actually I think sort of stems back to also what Noah was talking about, there's not like it's all like individual trainer cards that have these effects that don't really connect well together. Like you have Pokecom, you can sit there and put a Pokemon back, get any Pokemon. But the problem is you're not going to always be able to do that because you don't always have a Pokemon in hand. And Quick Ball is only going to be able to get you basics. Evo Incense would be good if we had already maxed out Centiskorch VMAXs and then needed more search for them. But that works more in the greens deck because you can search it out. And the Evo Incense themselves is basically just like taking up 2 more spots to find specifically a VMAX. So I came to the conclusion of Pokeball because I was searching through just like going through the PTCGO trainer cards and trying to see what cards worked well in finding Pokemon. And I came across Pokeball, and everybody knows it's a 50% chance that you flip heads and get any Pokemon you want. So I incorporated it into my deck along with Pokecoms and Quick Balls because pretty much because finding basics is going to be really important as well. You still need to be able to find Dedenes, and Milos currently plays Jirachis and stuff. And Pokeball was a really good way of giving me that extra shot of not only being able to find the Centiskorch VMAX, but also being able to find Dedenne or the Centiskorch V. And so it provided another situational out to any Pokemon that I needed. And it actually also brought up some interesting sequencing issues when I had like Pokeball plus Pokecom and a Pokemon in my hand. Because then you can check the Pokeball first and then get a different Pokemon off the Pokecom. And I just think that Pokeball is something that I could see myself putting in other sorts of VMAX decks. Probably not Eternatus. And I'm not even sure like what other VMAX decks people are playing right now. Probably not Inteleon. I'm not really sure, but maybe Inteleon. But I've honestly been liking Pokeball a decent amount, and I think I could see myself playing it in more VMAX decks that pop up as we get new sets released, as well as just playing it in Centiskorch right now.
Okay,
Right.
I can go first. Or do you want to go, Henry? You go ahead.
No, you guys there. Take this
Okay.
one.
Well, I don't really want to go first because I just kind of I don't want to hard disagree, but I kind of disagree with the mentality of Pokeball. So if anyone else has actually any constructive thoughts before I just say why I don't like it, then that's probably better to go first.
Okay. Well, first off, are you playing 4-com to begin with?
I'm playing. Actually, my trainer setup is 4 Quick Ball, 3 Pokeball, 3 Com. I did have 4 Com, but I did have 4 of 4/4, but I needed to cut one of each for another staple. Like I think I was a little low on energy as well, so I need to cut one of each for like an energy plus something else. I don't remember.
Okay. Well, are you talking about how Pokemon you have to have the Pokemon in hand? And of course, you already have a Pokemon you need in hand, and then you have to get rid of it, and then suddenly you have some, I guess, drawbacks. Like let's say you have a VMAX in your hand,
Yeah.
you need Dedenne, then you can't com for the Dedenne because, well, I mean you can, but then you lose the Centiskorch. So, but then it's still better to, I guess, guarantee the Dedenne than flip. But then it's the same thing. So what are the odds that you have a Pokemon in your hand to make com live, or what are the odds that you flip heads on the Pokeball? And the other thing as well is that why is Pokeball in this sense better than Great Ball? Because you argue that Pokecom might not always have a Pokemon in hand. What if you play Great Ball? Even if you miss the Pokemon you want, it still activates Com, right? And also you could have scenarios where you could just need a Dedenne, or you could need something else. Let's say you have a Dedenne, you get a Dedenne off Great Ball, then you just Com one back. Things like that. Like Great Ball having a higher chance to activate Com than Pokeball would is good. I also feel like you don't always like lose out on Great Ball, at least more than Pokeball would. Don't get me wrong, I don't like Great Ball necessarily, but it feels like a better fix than Pokeball. And I think that Pokeball as well, with like the 50% chance, I said in the past, like Com kind of has a hidden coin flip, as you were saying, but I think it's better than 50-50, especially in the early game. And if you're playing Jirachi as well, if you weren't playing Jirachi, I think that the value of Com would be lower. But the fact that you clearly have like a pretty high count of Pokemon is, I'd argue, a higher Com count than Pokeball in the first place. But what do you think about like the value of Great Ball over Pokeball?
So I actually did think about that at first, and I was thinking like, why is Great Ball not just better than Pokeball? And I'm not 100% convinced it is, but my reasoning made me think that it was. And so basically, when you play Great Ball and when you play Pokecom, they're both dependent on how many Pokemon are in your deck, right? And I think my list, I play maybe I want to say 12 or 13 Pokemon because I have the VMAX lines and I have the search Pokemon, but I don't play like heavy Volcanion or anything. I think I actually play just like one Volcanion. That's just how my personal build of Centiskorch is going. So Pokecom and Great Ball are both dependent on how many Pokemon are in your deck. And the other thing about Great Ball is that where Eternatus can play Great Ball and sort of get any Pokemon and accelerate its win condition because it needs any sort of Pokemon to be able to bench it and get that extra damage output, Centiskorch needs to be able to find specific Pokemon at specific times, particularly VMAXs and support Pokemon like Dedenne. And Great Ball is not particularly amazing at finding those specific Pokemon. And also Pokecom is has a similar but different issue because you still need to be able to have a Pokemon in hand to be able to find those. So if you go Great Ball and you don't find the Pokemon you're looking for, you're just going to fail it unless, of course, you have the Com in hand. And then if you like have Com and you don't have the Pokemon, then you're just going to fail the Com anyways. You won't always have the Great Ball and the Com in hand, but when you do, it may just work out like that. And it may only, but it's still only going to get you the one Pokemon that you need. So the reason I think Pokeball is slightly better is because it offers a different kind of it offers a different kind of drawback as opposed to Pokecom and Great Ball both being reliant on the number of Pokemon in your deck and what sort of Pokemon you can find / what sort of Pokemon you need. Pokeball is a straight 50-50 flip, and combined with the other amounts of Pokemon search that I have in my deck, and with the additive bonus that if you flip heads, you may be able to use another search card for a completely different Pokemon because maybe you need like VMAX plus Dede, but maybe you need like VMAX plus Dede, but maybe if you flip heads on the Pokeball, you can search out the Dede with your other search card or other things. And so like it just offers that different sort of situational effect that you can potentially use to accelerate your board state. And I totally get like why it seems bad, and don't get me wrong. I totally understand why it like seems bad, but I think it's definitely something interesting to at least try out. And I think it's like, I personally think it's not that bad. If I can get Centiskorch VMAXs from a friend for Hegster Friday, I will be playing it. Yes, assuming that I don't just get ADP'd out of the game. So yeah.
All right.
Well,
Pokeball
just before, I think that based on the what you're saying, you only play low count of like Pokemon. I feel like there's areas you could probably like shore up in a deck before you start touching Pokeball, like higher Jirachi count, higher just Pokemon count in general, because I feel like
that
making
Pokemon
Com a
count
better card.
surprised
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. So
well, I'm trying to think right now. I do play. I'll be the first to admit I'm not the most amazing deck builder, and I'm not the most amazing deck builder for sure. For Centiskorch particularly, like my list is just sort of like straightforward. Like I don't play Cramorant. I actually play like a Reshizard instead of Heatran. I've been trying that out. I'm not sure which one's better, but like I play like just a 4-3 VMAX. Can't remember 3-4 Jirachi, and then of course like 2 Day, 1 Crobat. I think the main thing where it's different is I only played like 1 Volcanion as opposed to 4, just because when I was playing like the 4, I was still finding it weird. I was still just like having these weird hands where like because when you play like 4 Volcanion and Centiskorch, you feel like you have to go second and go aggressively for that turn 1 Flare Starter onto a Centiskorch. But I was finding that like it was weirdly inconsistent. Me personally, I was finding that it was like weirdly inconsistent to try and like dig for that on a turn 1 when like that. If that's your whole turn 1 strategy, not only are you a welder deck, you're also sort of a stage 1 deck. So I was sort of building my list to be able to just like go first, get the guaranteed turn 2 120 into next turn, setting up for bigger KOs, because like if you go 120 with Senti and then attach 1 from discard, and then the next turn you go welder 2 plus attach, that's still a team by turn 3. So like I just decided to take the go first approach, and I still have 1 Volcanion because like if you go second and you hit the nuts, like it's pretty good. But I think that's where it seems like my Pokemon count is a bit off, because people are playing like 4 Volcanion and they're playing like Cramorant and they're playing Heatran and they're playing all these other stuff, whereas I'm just going like streamlined Centiskorches, and I wanted better chances of just being able to find Centiskorches and potentially Dedennes for turn 1 and turn 2. And honestly, there's still stuff that I wish I had in my deck that I don't currently have.
Fair enough. I think that I mean, coin flips in general aren't ideal, but there's definitely some maths to where they're probably better than other cards. But it's definitely been interesting for us to think about and discuss. So thanks for coming on, Aaron.
Yeah. Oh, actually, one more thing. A lot of people are just slapping like random coin flip cards into their deck anyways. Like I've seen Centiskorch lists with Crushing Hammer and Turbo Patch and all this random junk. Like if you manage to have the space for like random Crushing Hammers and Turbo Patches, like flipping tails on those cards can end up being way more detrimental to a game plan, because you could be ending up relying on a Crushing Hammer flip because you just made your deck that much more inconsistent. So if you're going to end up playing coin flip cards anyways, like honestly, Pokeball might just be better because it gives you that 50% chance out in like certain weird situations where like if you get into a dead hand but you have a Crushing Hammer, like what's that going to do, versus dead hand plus Pokeball, well, you have a shot. And also like I just feel like Pokeball is probably a better coin flip card in that situation. I probably would have played over Hammers in like ADP, but definitely in VMAX decks. I don't know why people are playing like Crushing Hammers in VMAX decks. That just seems weird. So that's definitely also a thought.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, the same is true. If you flip tails on your Pokegear or Pokeball, same thing with Hammer or whatever. Obviously, it's just a little bit worse. Yeah. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up so we can get into some other guests. But Aaron, thank you so much for coming on, and we enjoyed the take.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Good night.
No problem.
Thanks.
All right, so thank you, JenksTCG, for the raid. I'm going to quickly explain this for all the new people here. ! Discord, join the Discord, peep the instructions channel, read that really quickly, then post your topic that you want to talk about in the podcast topics chat, and then join the waiting room call. I'll drag you in. We have about 30 minutes left on the show, so just keep that in mind. Probably going to get through, probably 4 more guests, and then we're going to go from there. Make sure that your topics are constructive. They deal with a lot of the community stuff, or just something silly like your favorite Skittles. So going with that, we're going to go ahead and drag in our next guest, the one and only, my boy Maxlow. Where are you calling from, and what's your name?
I'm calling from the old 256 out in Alabama, you know what I'm saying? Everybody, I'm Steven Maxlow, also known as the Flow T-Cast. What's going on, boys? How y'all doing?
Yes, sir.
What's up, man?
Doing good.
All right, so today you bring us some interesting topics. Go ahead and give them to us.
All right, so my first topic is for you, Jenks. I want to understand, when you dropped that food tier list forever ago, why In-N-Out wasn't goated, bro. What's the problem here?
All right, so I see from the topic you posted, these are more targeted, so I'm going to go ahead and go with mine and then let you move on to the others. So here's the reason that In-N-Out wasn't ranked as highly, because I believe yours was S tier, right? Or the top?
Yeah.
All right, so we got to keep in mind that tier list was not made by just me. There are also 2 other people's opinions in that, and that went for a lot of the restaurants on there. If I had never been there, I let them rank it. So that's where I was like debating in the comments, the stuff like that. As someone that grew up on the West Coast for 11 years, my dad did not like In-N-Out. Like, he still thinks it sucks. So my family was not like an In-N-Out frequenter. Before moving to Maryland, I had probably had it 4 times. I couldn't even tell you what it tasted like back then. I just literally couldn't remember. So it kind of took me going back to Anaheim, California as my first time trying it whenever I went there for Worlds 2017, I think it was. And I really liked it then. I would also rank it in the S tier when I went to Anaheim that year. The following year, when I was in there for the regionals or whatever, I remember going there with a group of like 5, and it's good. Don't get me wrong. I don't think In-N-Out sucks. It's just like, compared to some of the other places, it's not as good. And I think you have to get animal style on literally everything for it to be S tier. And that's such like a limiter, right? Like, the fries are not super special. The burgers, they're solid. The milkshakes are great. But, if you're not getting an animal style, like, you're kind of catching an L.
Yeah, Fat. I'll give you that one, Fat. You have to go animal style, or it's not worth it. Like, why are you even there?
Exactly. So that's why it's not gonna be S for me. And like, the stuff is a little underwhelming for me. I don't remember where I ranked it or where we ranked it, but I don't think it's a bad restaurant. I wouldn't mind eating there. It's not something I will never touch with a 10-foot or you know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, that's gonna be my wrap on that one.
I got you. Yo, Isaiah. Since I've been
What's up?
I stole your Eternatus list and pretty much claimed it as my own. How we feeling about dangerous drills, bro? You still playing them, or
All right.
or no?
I need to think about it honestly, because Dangerous Drill was mainly in for like the very early format mirrors, right? Like, you could take a huge advantage by discarding your opponent's energy. There was some things like Big Charm and ADP at the beginning of the format, but now the format's like evolved. Now I'm thinking through the meta, they're not really useful versus ADP ever. They're not really useful versus Mewtwo. They're not going to be useful in Mirror. People are playing the all basic energy variant. And I know I'm missing a meta somewhere. They're not. All right, they're okay versus Cinescorch, but I don't think in my list they're really going to be that impactful. So honestly, you're probably better off cutting them now. Maybe you want to play something like a Tool Scrapper. Maybe you want to try to play Crushing Hammers, but I think that Dangerous Drill is kind of past its prime. It was insane at the beginning of the format, but now that the format's evolved to these kind of hyper consistent lists, I think that Etern should probably cut it in form of some text for the loot bundle matchup if you can find any, or just maybe something to help with Crushing Hammer like Turbo Patch.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, I just want to get your thought on that real quick.
I will say, isn't Drill good against Luca Metal though, because you can get rid of their goggles?
Yeah, Drill is good versus Luke Metal, but you can just play Scrapper and have the same effect. So if Drill's not going to be good against anything else, then you can play like one Scrapper and probably have the same effect. But that matchup is rough, even with the Drill.
For sure. Unless you're playing the Poison variant. Shout out to the homies playing that.
Yeah, that build is pretty funny.
All right, Henry, I'd have a question for you, but I got to get going, man. So
hey, no worries.
It was good hearing from you guys. I'll be back next week, maybe.
Hey, yo, thank you, Max.
Right.
If everyone in the
We'll
chat hasn't checked it out, the Flow
What's
TK
that?
cast. The Flow T cast is where you want to be. Check out my boy. Thank you, Maxlo, for
Big
coming
fat
on.
Yo, Pimpish coming soon.
I'll see you. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, man.
See ya.
All right, the next caller. I think we might only have time for the next two, but we might be able to get one in. We got a really interesting topic up next, having to do with school and applications, and then the following one is going to be a pretty cool take on flip cards. So let's go ahead and get the first person calling in. You know him as the Luke Metal Master. Gonna go ahead and drag him in. What's your name and where you're calling from?
Hello, I am Jake Gearhart, and I am the Luke Metal Master. And I'm from Minnesota, so that's where I am right now.
Awesome. Yeah. Glad to have you on, Jake. What is your topic?
So for me, I'm going to be sending in college applications soon, which is pretty stressful, but also exciting. And I'm applying for classical music composition and programming. So one, what is your guys' favorite classical music pieces that I should take inspiration from to finish out my portfolio? We can start with that.
All right. I am just going to say that I have absolutely no idea. I personally don't listen to classical music. So while I wish that I could help you here, I am going to have to tap out on this one.
So uncultured, Isaiah.
I know. I'm sorry. These Zoomers, bro. These Zoomers.
Zoomers, man. All right, Jakes, what about you as the other Zoomer around?
Well, once again, gonna go with Isaiah, but I'm not that uncultured. My man Beethoven always stay cooking, so I'm gonna go with. Is it called Beethoven Symphony? I'm not sure the correct name, but
I think you're thinking of probably
Which one?
Beethoven.
He has 9 of them.
all right. Well, we'll go with number 5.
Yes,
All
sir. Yes, sir.
Well, Jake would have heard me play some classical music on stream. So I was
definitely
raised
enjoyed that.
quite and exposed to quite a lot. A lot of card trips, a lot of classical music. Yeah, obviously a lot of Beethoven, like the Pastoral Symphony. Then Grieg. You saw me playing some Brahms on stream, so I guess any of that is pretty nice. I think they'd probably be the ones I touch on. Maybe some Bach if you want to go down that, but pretty different styles.
Yeah, that's all good to think about. Yeah, I'll keep those in mind. Okay, and my second question is, do you guys have any ideas for any tools that like Pokemon TCG could use, like online tools that I could potentially like program? Yeah.
Okay, I actually want to go first on this one. I saw something that was incredibly cool in Verbank at some point. I don't know if it was the Pokemarket, I don't know if it was Verbank, but as someone that has done a ton of research on personal finance, and Jake, I don't know how interested you are on this topic, but someone, I don't think it was Flawless, but someone designed a stock market portfolio for trading cards with the sudden boom in what's it called? The Pokemon market, with Gary Vee getting into it, Logan Paul getting into it. You have all these huge influencers getting into Pokemon cards because they're basically the next sports card or whatever. I love stocks. I research them all the time. And I thought, I don't know where I saw this, but I'm pretty sure it was Verbank. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. There was a lot of comments saying it didn't work or whatever. But if you could do something like that, I think that would be so cool. So for example, you own a Dark Blastoise first edition, and you track all the eBay listings or whatever listings, and average the price or whatever, and then it goes up and down based on the last sold listing. I think that'd be sick, and I think colleges would actually like that a lot too.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. Yeah, I could work on that.
I think that you're probably a little bit restricted by, when it comes to TCGO at least, by the way they work, because I know in a lot of other card games the API is way more accessible. Although when it comes to TCGO, I think it's pretty kind of, I guess, closed off. So I'm not entirely too sure you can make in terms of integrating with TCGO. But as opposed to that, I think a lot of things have been done already, but maybe some kind of like Decklist aggregator would probably be pretty interesting to have a look at, like a program that automatically, I guess, aggregates lists. But it'd be pretty hard to, I guess, automate that. I'm not like that experienced in programming, but I think something like that, like some sort of central resources for Decklist could be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I also have no idea on this one. It sounds like a great idea. It sounds like something that would obviously be impressive on your application if you can pull it off. So I wish you the best of luck. And that's about all the help I can give you, Jake.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, thank you all for your input. I will keep these in mind.
No problem.
Yeah.
And if you end up designing, if you end up designing some sort of stock market portfolio for Pokemon cards, please let me know. I would love to work with you.
Yeah, I'll definitely let you know. Yeah, and everyone go read my article I just published on 6 prizes.
Yep,
I spent a lot of time on that yesterday.
If you haven't seen Jake's article and you want to learn more about Lucario Metalization, I highly recommend you go check it out. It is on 6 prizes. I believe it's free, maybe?
Yeah, it's free.
All right, it is free. So that means all you got to do is click the link to find it. Pretty simple. No paywall needed. Thank you, Jake, for coming on, and we're going to go ahead and move into our last guest for the night.
Thanks, Jake.
See you, my guy.
All right, so last guest of the night. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and drag him in. Welcome to the PTCG Hotline. You're going to be our last guest of the night. What's your name and where you're calling from?
Oh, 1 second. I think my audio's messed up. 1 sec.
No problem. We got a fellow streamer in the call. So we gotta get that God audio.
Let's go.
All right, I believe I can hear now. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. What's your name and
All
where are you
right.
calling from?
So I am 9 out of Ben, or that's what most people know me as. And my topic is, and this is sort of a hot take, but if you have space for Crushing Hammer in your deck, and you are not specifically a stall deck, you're better off playing Judge Whistle for consistency.
Okay. I'll say the first thing. I think that this take might technically be true, but I also think that it's kind of a broad take because I think there's like an infinite number of good cards you can play over Crushing Hammer. So when you say you can play Judge Whistle over it, I can say, yeah, you could play Judge Whistle, or you could play Fourth Cherish Ball, Third Dedenne, etc., etc., etc. So do you mean like Judge Whistle is good, or are you just trying to use it as a comparative for look how bad this card is, even this card is better than Crushing Hammer?
So I think it's a little bit of both. And this comes from my background knowledge in other TCGs, such as Magic the Gathering, where you're allowed more than a 60 card deck, but no matter how good that 61st card in your deck is, you always cut it. If it is the 61st card in your deck, you always cut it for consistency reasons. The same logic applies to Pokemon most of the time. You always want the most consistent form of a deck, and if you are able to play a 56 card deck as opposed to a 60 card deck, that gives you a massive advantage over your opponent.
So I've also played a good bit of other trading card games, and I've thought about this. I've talked with one of my good friends, Preston Ellis. We've talked about this topic a lot, and I actually think that it's kind of hard to put that logic into Pokemon because if you look at the games, they're completely different, right? A card in Magic that said discard your hand and draw 7 would probably be the best card ever printed in the game. Like that would actually be insane. But in Pokemon, it's a card that we have the luxury of having every format. We have a card that does that. We have another card that says discard your hand and draw 6, so we can see 13 cards of our deck every turn. While in Magic, they see 1, right? They see the top card of their deck. So in Magic, having that extra card, like if Pokemon, we drew 1 card every turn, then that time I draw that Crushing Hammer, I might lose the game because they don't have an energy. Where if I draw Judge Whistle, I can Judge Whistle, draw an extra card. But in Pokemon, like I can draw the Crushing Hammer and then research and draw 7, and then Dedenne and draw 6. And then, I just have so much reach in Pokemon that I feel like you can't really compare the two because whenever Judge Whistle came out, there was a lot of talk of everyone's going to play 4, you get a 56 card deck, but Pokemon's kind of the opposite. I have a lot of decks that I would want to play 70 cards in if I could. There's just so much in Pokemon you want to fit. More cards in Pokemon often equals more consistency, which is the opposite of other games. So I think that that's kind of a hard thing to do just because it's just completely opposite of the other games and how it's built.
So I can see your point. A counter to that, though, is yes, you can have your research and your Dedenne, and let's say you have a maxed out research count, a maxed out Dedenne count, it is more digging than even that. So like, let's say you have 4 Judge Whistles in your deck and you research and you draw all 4 Judge Whistles and then you play all 4 Judge Whistles into 4 more cards, you're digging not 7 cards, but 11.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I just think that at some point there comes diminishing returns on the amount of consistency you put in your deck, and I think that that's an interesting topic on the trading card game you could talk about forever, probably. But yeah, I just think there's diminishing returns for putting in those 4 Judge Whistle, where you can play 4 Crushing Hammer, which I don't think is an amazing card, but do win you games. I have lost plenty of games to ADPs that have 4 Crushing Hammer for some reason, but they flip heads, and then I lose the game because I don't have energy on board. So Crushing Hammer is such a high impact card, and Judge Whistle is such a low impact card in a lot of situations. That's why I feel that it might actually be better to play Crushing Hammer because the kind of game that Pokemon is.
Yeah, so I think that I think it's heavily deck dependent, right? Because Judge Whistle as a card in general is very niche. So it's not really like Acrobike where you're guaranteed to get Deep Dig or anything. It just makes you play a 56 card deck. Now when it comes to the only deck that I've ever seen it played in, which I somewhat agreed with its inclusion, like I did was Greenzard that Joao played, and Braga played, and a bunch of other people in South America played. They won a lot of events with it, and that was because it was a Greens deck, right? And so the only reason they played it was to really get into greens because it like absolutely needed to, right? And that was on top of Acrobike and gear, and you can understand the inclusion. But when it comes to like over Crushing Hammer in these decks that already play Dedenne and already have so many extenders to their play, like so much draw power and everything, it really doesn't seem like much of a reason to me to be putting Judge Whistle in. I've seen some inclusions in Eternatus just because you want to go really fast. But you could argue that at the same time, like a heads-on Crushing Hammer is so impactful. Like think about, as Isaiah was saying, the ADP versus Mewtwo matchup. Like if you go first as
Yep.
Mewtwo and then they flip heads on Crushing Hammer, you probably lose like every time.
Mhm.
Like you almost can't win. And so the impact of Crushing Hammer, whilst I don't agree with playing it, is so big that I'd argue that it has more impact over Judge Whistle. At the very least, you could agree that you shouldn't be playing the hammers in the first place, and you should be playing other better consistency cards or other power cards. But I don't think Judge Whistle is the one.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was mostly my point. Regardless, is just play more consistency cards. Regardless, Judge Whistle was just like the example off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Sure.
I'm gonna go ahead and agree with Henry and Isaiah. I think that the effect on some of these cards, namely Crushing Hammer and even Pokemon Catcher to an extent, is just too good. And Ben, I'm gonna have to agree with you that as a consistency card, it's definitely good. Henry did a perfect example, kind of took what I was gonna say. So I'm agreeing with him in that sense. We see players like Joao and Alexander Braga playing this card in greens because if you don't find greens, you kind of just lose. Your deck, doesn't have a lot going for it. Just has a bunch of tag teams, and the greens is really how you get going. And they played that Judge Whistle on top of the other draw to get into it. And I think that was, it served its purpose. It was really good. And it wasn't actually something we saw that got adapted outside of some of the South American tournaments. But I think as a consistency card, it's completely fine. But for a lot of these decks, Crushing Hammer and Pokemon Catcher might just be more effective. Especially with so much
it's
already.
It's also it's also just like I said at the beginning, they're just kind of better consistency cards in most situations. Aaron was on last time talking about how he wanted to play Pokeball in his deck, and we wouldn't say, well, play Judge Whistle. Your deck will be more consistent. Find your Centiskorch. We would say, play Great Ball, play Pokecom, play that 4th VMAX, play Cherish Ball to get your Dedenne. I think that in this trading card game, especially right now, we're spoiled with the amount of consistency cards we have. So it's hard to lose out on 4 spots whenever we have such broken cards in format.
Yeah, and also I think that the big thing with the reason people playing Crushing Hammer is that sometimes the deck maybe doesn't even need more consistency. Like they might just not be able to beat certain matchups without the help of these like unfair coin flip like cards that give them so much power in the game. Like think about ADP versus Mewtwo, like matchup's pretty unfavorable even with more consistency. And so denying that Flare Blitz or denying Eternatus attacking turn 2, things like that. Whilst I wouldn't go that way, you can justify trying to fix your bad matchups through, I guess, like almost cheating with coin flips.
Yeah, that's like the entire strategy of Pigrom right now. They have a lot of matchups that they can't do anything to outpace, but they're a deck that can draw so many cards and fit 4 hammers and 2 Yell Grunt that they say, well, I'm just going to kind of sack you and make you not attack. And my deck is worse, but that's fine because your deck isn't going to work.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a wrap on the topic. It was a really cool one. I really liked the connection to other games from Ben, and then I know Isaiah's been experimenting with stuff like Magic and whatnot, so it was really cool to see the explanation there. I know that from Magic players that I've met in the past, the Draw 7 effect, like Isaiah mentioned, is just completely unheard of. But I'm going to go ahead and give you the final say on the topic, Ben, and if nothing else, we're going to have go ahead and wrap up here.
I just really appreciate you guys' insight. I agree with like 99% of what you guys said. So yeah, I definitely think consistency over flip cards. But yeah, you're right. Like some of those flip cards like Hammer are so important in matchups that are unfavorable, like ADP versus Mewtwo, that sometimes it's justifiable to have a less consistent deck to beat a whole like percentage of decks in the meta that you would otherwise auto lose to.
Absolutely. And it's a great topic. I love it. And I think as Braga, one of the Judge Whistle players himself, said in the topics chat, best topic he's read tonight. So love the topic, Ben. Glad to have you on.
Yep.
And we'll see you in the next week's, hopefully. But that's going to be it for tonight, guys. Another successful episode of... And there we go. Joao in the chat saying the card is still good. We got both the boys in here.
No,
repping,
stop. It
repping
was
the
never
whistle.
good. Stop.
But that's going to be it for
Stop.
another episode of the PTCG Hotline, the show with the hottest takes and talks that involves you, the viewer. I'm going to go ahead and give it to Henry and Isaiah for closing, and then I'll do a final wrap-up before we head home. So, Benry, take it away.
Yeah, well, this was a good one. Thanks for everyone calling in. Thanks, Isaiah, as well, for coming. Thanks for having me, as always, Will, for being a co-host. It was good. I liked a lot of the topics. I feel like I'm almost becoming a broken record when it comes to these things and the health of the format, but it's always interesting to talk about. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming along. Isaiah, let's close it out.
Just thank you everyone for coming on. Thank you, Will and Henry, for having me on this podcast. A few shout outs. I'm on Twitter. Follow me at Isaiah Bradner, and then I'm on Twitch at Bradner Blastoise. Go follow me on those two mediums. And then I write articles for Channel Fireball. So you can go and see my articles there. But yeah, that's it. Thank you both so much for having me on, and thank you for everyone for bringing the interesting topics tonight.
Absolutely. Glad to have you on, Isaiah. For the chat out there, we had a great time having Isaiah on, and we will probably have him on again, as he is one of my closest friends. But if you have someone that you want to see on the podcast for next week or a future week, please be sure to let me know and Henry know. That can be through Discord, through messages, through chat right now, through Twitter, anything like that. We want to get these guests weekly so that we can get, different insight from different players, not always just, me and Henry on the cast. That's the goal with these special guests. And this is the podcast that involves the hot topics and takes. We want to hear you guys as the viewers, and this podcast wouldn't function without you guys. So big thanks to all of you out there. And as Isaiah said, CFB Pro, if you're going to sub to CFB Pro, you better be using code Jenks and not code whatever Bradner's is. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Later.
See you guys.